Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome on into Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports. Jared Smith, Lauren Jabara, here to give you all the latest and greatest updates for Week 10 of NFL. I just hit my coffee. I'm getting all wild with my hands over here. And Week 11 of college football. Jared, how are you? Happy Friday, almost the weekend.
Yeah, working for the weekend, baby. We'll be working through the weekend, of course, for you, because we love you so much. Um, how you doing over there?
I'm good. It's been crazy. 3 Hawks games in 4 days. Now leave today for a road
Oh wow.
trip. Doing the
Oh
show
wow.
too. So it's so much fun every single day. Double
Rock
dipping
star.
and everything. I love it. But we have a lot to talk about today. First of all, let's start it out with that Thursday night football game last night. Like the NFC South needs to have a come to Jesus moment. I don't know what is going on in this division right now, but we're probably going to have a sub 500 division winner this year, like the fourth time ever in NFL history. Carolina took a page out of Atlanta's playbook, ran the ball right down their throats all night, 232 yards on 47 carries. Deontay Foreman, 130 yards and a touchdown. And the Panthers end up winning that game. And Marcus Mariota didn't have his best game either. What did you make of, you know, just a weird NFC South matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was your typical Thursday night game, right? You had some sloppy play. The weather was a little bit of a factor. Not a
Yeah.
huge factor, but it was a little damp, a little moist out there, a little windy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think I was really that surprised with the result. I mean, we all, Club TA, Carolina and the under was the pick last night. So not a very surprising result. I think Tampa's gonna pull out that division. I think Tampa's gonna
Okay.
figure it out, and they're a game under 500 right now. We'll see how things go in Germany this week. But from there, they have some relatively easy games on their schedule, although they do have a game at the Niners, which is going to be really tough. But they face the Cardinals, they
Mm-hmm.
face the Panthers again, they face the Falcons again. So I would be willing to bet that the Bucks finish with, let's say, a 9-8 record, and they win the NFC South by like 3 games. That's
Okay.
probably the road we're going down here, but it's definitely not the most dominant division in football this season.
Yeah. If you had to bet on it now, would you bet on the team that's going to win the NFC South to be over 500? You think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to go 9-8?
Yeah, I mean they're 4-5 right now, so I don't think it's unreasonable, for
Yeah.
them to go 6-3 down the stretch. Or what would they? Well, I don't even know. The math is eluding me right now. If they're 5-4 down the stretch, that means they have 8 more games, and they would have to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
they play 17 games, and they would have to go 5-3. I don't think. I mean, because again, they faced the Seahawks this week. They're favored. They're going to face
Mm-hmm.
the Cardinals. They'll probably be favored there, and then they get the Falcons and the Panthers the last 2 weeks. They're definitely going to be favored in both of those
Yeah.
games. So I don't think it's unreasonable for them to win one of those of the toss-up games and them to finish 5-3 and 9-8 overall. I wouldn't bet on it, but I don't think it's
Yeah.
unreasonable to think that that team can go 5-3 down the stretch.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the NFC South, but we'll get into that a little bit more throughout the next couple of weeks. We are now at the second half of the NFL football season. I also
Yes,
want
we
to talk
are.
a little bit about college basketball, Jared, because I know you've been getting into it, just dipping your toes for a few games. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to see some of these games really start to heat up. I know you mentioned Thanksgiving week, especially. We're going to have some really, really good college basketball games to be betting on. But before the season started, you're looking at some futures for college basketball. I haven't necessarily gotten into my CBB betting like yet, but I will get there in a couple weeks, especially that Thanksgiving week. I'm excited about that. Talking about your college basketball futures, who have you got some money on? Who do you like? And who do you think is going to be profitable for you this season?
Well, first of all, obviously Jim Root, our pal, who was so instrumental in a lot of our success last year during the tournament. Um, we had a powwow right after the season ended, actually, like early April-ish, late mid-April.
Mm-hmm.
And we started, just having a chat, me and also Tim Murray, who we've had
Yeah.
on the show many times, about, teams for next year. At that time, we all kind of came to an agreement. that Houston was the team we were going to be targeting for next year. At the time, they were 20-1. So we all kind of pooled our funds and made a wager on Houston at 20-1 to win the title. Several weeks later, we
Wow.
kind of circled the wagons again, and we got in on Baylor, also at a very favorable price, 20. Actually, I think, let me check my sheet right now. The Baylor price was 20-1, and Houston was 22-1. I made the Houston bet on April 7th. I made the Baylor bet on May 26th. Well, the market has responded very positively since then. Houston right now is actually the not odds on favorite, excuse me. They are the favorite to win the national title at plus 850. And Baylor is, about a notch behind at 12-1. I would still bet on both right now, even though you're obviously getting significantly less value than the prices that I got in at. But if I had to pick two teams right now that I think are going to be in the Final Four, those are the two teams I would pick. I think Baylor has the best backcourt in America. They've got a lot of players back from the team last year, Flagler and Cryer, and they've got this freshman Langston Love, who I think is going to be an absolute rock star. And they play in what I think is the toughest conference in college basketball, top to bottom. And I think at the end of the day, Scott Drew will have his team as that best team in the Big 12. Houston's a bit of a different animal. They play in a very weak conference, but they are light years ahead of everyone else in that league. And they're just so deep. Sasser, they've got this freshman Walker, who's going to be an absolute rock star, the highest recruited player in the history of Houston's program. Still got Jamal Shedd in the backcourt. They're very experienced. They were in the Elite Eight last year, and they lost to Villanova because they went 1 of 20 from 3. And if you flip that game and they make 3 or 4 more threes, they're probably in the Final Four, and they're probably in the national championship game. So I think Houston's right there, and we haven't seen Kelvin Sampson get over that hump in several years. I think this is the year that he gets back to the Final Four, and we've seen them in the Final Four in recent years. But then in the national semifinal is kind of where they've kind of crapped out. So I think, and it's ironic that it was Baylor-Houston 2 years ago in the Final Four. And of course, Baylor won that game, and then they won the national title. So I think those are the two teams that I would target right now as the two teams as Final Four caliber. But again, very early in the year, we'll develop and we'll probably add to this portfolio as the season goes on.
Yeah, you loved Houston last year, too. I know you were riding them hard. Them and the Richmond Spiders were like one of your top 2 favorite teams, too.
I don't remember that, but maybe.
You loved the Spiders.
Maybe in the tournament for a couple of games.
Yeah, the tournament. You love the Spiders.
I bet on so many things since last year's March Madness. I don't even know how you remember that. I don't even remember that.
Because I honestly hate, to be honest with you, I have arachnophobia and I hate spiders, and the fact that every single time I say their name, I was cringing a little bit, to be honest.
I think we have discussed that before.
But you were riding high on Houston last year, riding high on them again. I love it. I absolutely love it. We are in college football week 11. Isn't that crazy? We only have 3 more weeks of regular season football left before we get into the conference finals, and then we get into bowl games, all of that jazz, the college football playoff, and things are kind of heating up at this point. TCU now ranked 4th, Georgia ranked 1st. This could be a look-ahead spot, maybe a little bit for Georgia going up against Mississippi State at Mississippi State. I want to get your plays because obviously you're not on the show tomorrow with your Fox Sports show. Your slate for college football week 11. I have 2 bets that I've locked in so far. I'm going to do maybe a couple more tonight, but I want you to entice me. What do you have going into tomorrow?
Well, I know we're on opposite sides of one, so I'll give you the other 3. And then you can give me your reasoning why I'm wrong on the one that we're up against. So one of the first bets I locked in this week was actually Wake Forest 3.5. It's up to 4 now. It's actually kind of kissing up against 4.5, frankly. But there's still some 4s out there. In fact, I still see a couple 3.5. So I think we're still good giving this out at 3.5. This is like a mini version of TCU Texas. This is like the preview version when you go to the movies and the previews are on. This is what you see before. It's like the preview to the main event. But the vibes are still the same. You get a UNC team that's 8-1, and they're one of the softest 8-1s I think you're going to see in the country this year. First of all, the ACC is incredibly bad, worse than we even imagined. You saw what Clemson did last week. Clemson was supposed to be the best team in the ACC, and it's just not good for the ACC right now. And UNC's schedule is absolutely brutal. They haven't played anybody. And the best team that they have played, Notre Dame, they were down 25 in the fourth quarter, and it was their one loss. So I think it's a pretty big step up in class here for UNC against Wake Forest. And one of the more prominent college football rankings guys in our space, Brad Powers, has the Tar Heels outside of his top 40 in the ratings. Now, Wake Forest has lost 2 games over the last 2 weeks, and they've turned it over 11 times. Those turnovers were only expected about half based off of how the play was developing.
Yeah.
And if you were going to ask me what's the perfect defense for Wake Forest to play when they're a little turnover prone, it's UNC, which has only forced 10 turnovers all season, and they're just not a very havoc creating defense. So I like Wake Forest bouncing back. If this game was played 2 weeks ago before those 2 losses to Louisville and NC State, this line's probably Wake -8. Now we're getting 3.5. So again, buy low on the Demon Deacons. I'm reluctant to pull the trigger on this pick, but when I get plays from people that I trust, I tend to shoot first and ask questions later. And I was given Washington plus 13.5 this week. The matchup to me says Oregon because Washington's secondary is just so bad and Oregon is playing so well at home, 5-0 against the spread in their last 5. But there's a case to be made that the market's gotten a little stretched on them because when you continuously cover in blowout fashion, things expand. And Washington can throw the ball, and that's Oregon's bugaboo, is they can be a little weak in the secondary sometimes. So I can see the back door being open in this game, but I don't have a strong feel for Washington against Oregon. But again, trusted people giving me bets. It's a big liability for the sports books this week. Everyone's betting Oregon. I get it. Finally, speaking of everyone betting one side, Ole Miss to me is one of the bigger public dogs of the season. People are going to be dancing on Nick Saban's grave all week.
Yeah.
But you know me, Lauren. I don't dance. I don't do the 2-step. I don't do the tango.
You do the contrarian
the salsa,
play.
The cha-cha. I don't do any of that shit. So
the samba.
You want to dance on – yeah. I don't dance. I just don't. I like to saunter, maybe skedaddle, but I don't dance. And everyone this week, all I'm hearing this week is the Alabama dynasty's over. It's done. Nick Saban needs to retire. And when I hear things like this,
people love the overreactions. They love the overreactions.
Of course,
absolutely, including me. I'm one of them. I'm a dramatic girl, but
that's okay.
We love the overreaction. Yeah.
But in gambling, you have to remove emotion if you really want to do it in the way that, I mean, you can do it any way you want, but removing emotion is, in my opinion, the hardest thing to do in gambling, but it's also the most effective. So if you really look at the core of this game, and when I really dived into it, I really did see a lot of advantages for Alabama, especially their front running the football against Ole Miss's defense, which can absolutely be gashed. Now, the Ole Miss schedule is what really stands out to me too. Alabama's lost 2 games at the buzzer to 2 of the better teams in the country, LSU and Tennessee.
Yeah.
Ole Miss played LSU, and they got absolutely blasted, 45-20. And they couldn't cover against A&M, despite rushing for 400 yards. When they step up in class, they don't have the hogs to really compete. Now, Alabama's down this year, relatively speaking. Their front is not as ferocious. Will Anderson's playing below expectation. Bryce Young's a little dinged up, and the receivers are not as talented as years past. But in the trenches, I still think Alabama can dominate this game. So I'm going to lay it with the Crimson Tide here. And I'm going to hope that the people dancing on Nick's grave are a little bit premature. So now tell me why I'm wrong about Texas blowing out TCU this week.
You think Texas is going to blow out TCU?
Well, 3 scores.
I don't. I really, really don't. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people are in TCU. They see them ranked 4th. They see them undefeated, and they're like, wait, they're a whole touchdown underdog? To be honest with you, Jared, I don't think TCU is a national championship contender, to be honest. But I also don't think that they should be getting a full touchdown in Austin. I just feel like with Texas, it's hard to know what to expect. They had a 49-0 win over Oklahoma, but this is the same team that also lost to Texas Tech 37-34. And I feel like people look really closely at their 1-point loss to Bama, and they're like, wow, this Texas team is really good. What was that, week 2 or week 3? TCU is 9-0 on the season and 4th in the rankings for a reason. I know they've played a lot of close games, but if you look at the stats for some of those games, they've outgained 8 of those 9 teams by massive margins. And then you look at the guys that they have, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Kendra Miller, over 1,000 yards so far through 10 weeks. Quentin Johnson, he's going to be a first-round pick in the NFL. Max Duggan, really, really impressive to me. He has an 80.1 QBR, which is the 14th best in college football. Only 2 interceptions, 24 touchdowns, and 2407 passing yards. I just feel like them getting 7 points, I know they're on the road. I know people have kind of thought of them as, hey, they don't really deserve what they're getting this season. I mean, even last week they were 8-0 and they were ranked 7th or 8th. Alabama was ranked above them at 7th with a one-loss Alabama team. Now, obviously, that changed this week. But I just feel like TCU this entire season has had a chip on their shoulder. And you cannot underestimate motivation in a spot like this. They look at those sports books. They see themselves as a 7-point underdog. They're like, what the heck? We're 9-0 on the season. We're undefeated. We're ranked 4th. They want to go into Austin, and I think they want to put on a show. They want to keep on their undefeated performance. Now, you tell me why you think that Texas is going to blow out the undefeated number 4 ranked in the AP poll, TCU.
Because that undefeated spot is just flimsy. 5 of the last 6 offenses TCU has faced has had a backup or a third-string quarterback. So it's easy to outgain teams when you're facing backups and third-string quarterbacks. Quentin Johnson has an ankle injury. He's questionable this week. Max Duggan has a calf injury. He's also not 100%. And
they're going to play.
I'm not saying they're not going to play, but Quentin Johnson, that's the one thing about TCU that's different than Texas and those other teams at the top.
Yeah.
They don't have the depth. When Quentin Johnson's banged up, they don't have a 5-star guy on the bench that they can go to as a backup. So I'm concerned with just TCU not being – they're ahead of schedule right now. Sonny Dykes in his first year. This is a team that is playing better than anyone could have ever imagined. And everyone's going to look at the odds this week, just like Tennessee, Georgia last week, where the number 1 team in the country closed as almost a double-digit underdog against the number 3 team, and they're going to see how can TCU be a 7-point underdog against 3-loss Texas. By the way, it's already 7.5, so don't lock your bet in yet, because this is going to move off of 7, just like Georgia did last week. It was 7, then 8. Actually, it never got to 7. It was really 8, then 8.5, and it almost closed at 10 because, again, excuse me, the sharp money is going to move the market more than the public will. And the smart money really likes Texas in this spot because they see the same things I see about TCU's overall level of play. And there's a lot of holes to be poked in their wins. The Kansas State game, they were down 18 to Kansas State. And then not only did Adrian Martinez get hurt, but Will Howard also got hurt. And they had the benefit of facing a third-string quarterback for the entire second half. If one of those guys stays healthy in that game, TCU's already got a loss. So I think the public perception here of who TCU really is it's a fugazi perception. And the other thing, the other wrinkle that I really love here, and I've talked about him a lot this season. I've probably mentioned his name more than any other analyst in the entire country. Gary Patterson as Texas's special assistant. Nobody knows this TCU team better than Gary frickin' Patterson. And he is on Texas's defensive staff. So the market's telling me TCU is going to get beat here. Now, does that mean it's going to happen on the field on Saturday? No. Anything can happen once they kick the ball off. But I like to be on the side of the sports books when I can, especially when the handicap, in my opinion, matches up.
Yeah. Do you want to place the swag bet on it?
No, because that is an immediate ticket for Texas to lose the game. No, I'm not. You're not going to reel me in, Jabara. I'm too experienced. I'm too savvy.
I tried.
You try.
Pull out there.
I will handshake you, and I will say good luck, and we will let things play out the way they do on the field. I am done. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me, I think 5 times.
5 times?
I it's been at least 3. I think it's been 4 or 5. I'm not. I lost count
it's
after
okay.
the time. Frankly.
Me too. Me too. It's okay. But yeah, this is going to be a fun game to watch, and obviously a big game for Texas if they're able to pull out the win, and even bigger game for
Huge game for
TCU
both
if
teams.
they're able to stay undefeated in the top 4 in the AP poll. One more bet before we bring in Danny. Really quick cap for me. Indiana taking on Ohio State. This is a lot of points at 39.5. I know Indy's lost 6 in a row. They've only averaged just under 20 points per game in that stretch. But Ohio State is an 0-3 against the spread team when favored by 35 points this season. And they also haven't covered in their last 2 games. I feel like maybe Ohio State could be just leaving the back door open, getting that breeze in. It's some nice fall air, and Indiana could sneak in there. 40 points almost. That is a lot of freaking points.
Just
so
wait
I'm
till
taking
later
Indiana
in the show.
plus
I'll give you
39
another
and a
game.
half.
That's a lot of points.
I mean, by no means do I think this is going to be a close game, but 40 points is a lot of freaking points. So I'm taking Indiana plus 39 and a half in this position. Why not? I mean, it's the game that everyone's talking about this week. Let's make it happen.
Sure.
All right. Let's bring in Danny Burke, getting back to some NFL talk. We're here in the second half of the football season. He's the host of the football betting podcast for VSiN Live and Bet on Chicago for WLSAM 890. Danny, how are you? It's been a minute since we've seen you.
Yeah, I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me. Always notice I'm a little
he
bit
just
more
got muted,
jolly.
Kyle. Oh, there we go.
Uh-oh.
He's unmuted.
We
But
all
keep
good?
going. We want to hear what you said. Yeah, you're
No,
good
I was
now.
just going to say, if you notice I'm a little bit more jolly, it's because I'm actually watching somewhat of a competent offense with my football team for once, the Bears. So even though the record's not that great, the progression is evident, and we'll take that as Bears fans.
Absolutely. And guess what? Both of us, our NFC North bottom feeder teams that we're usually rooting for, me with the Lions, you with the Bears, we're coming out of last week feeling pretty damn good about ourselves. Okay, let's talk about Justin Fields because you just mentioned him. Can he keep this streak going? It really seems like the Bears are now playing to his strengths and they're knowing how to use him in their offense.
Yeah, and that was really a clear necessity after the first couple of games in this new offense designed by Luke Getsy. And now he's finally getting him into a rhythm. I was incredibly critical of Luke Getsy at the beginning of the season, as was a lot of people, because like you talked about, the offense is now pertaining to his skill set, which, you know, us Bears fans have been pleading for quite some time. He's not your prototype of a stereotypical pocket passer. He's not just going to stay in there, make the second read, and call audibles at the line of scrimmage all the time. No, he clearly needs to have an offense around him based on the likes of Lamar Jackson and what the Ravens do, based on what Jalen Hurts and the Eagles do. And they even admitted that they took a couple pages out of the playbook of Baltimore, and that's when things started working. And it really finally clicked post-Commanders game, which I think was the most disappointing loss since the double doink. And after that, they go Monday Night Football, take on Bill Belichick on the road, who historically dominates brand new head coaches and young quarterbacks, yet the Bears completely outcoached him in that game. They had an offensive design that worked. The running game, they're the number 1 rushing offense in the NFL. They've gotten over 200 yards the past 4 consecutive games. So even though Fields still isn't necessarily throwing as much, as long as the ball is moving, I'm pretty content. And now seeing that they're actually, again, utilizing his skill set, I think he'll get there once they acquire more weapons and a better protection in front of him with his offensive line. And look, now you got Claypool with a week of experience and kind of got the nerves out of the way. So we'll see what they can do this week against your Lions.
That game is the line is curiously tight. I'll just leave it at that. I expected 3 there, frankly, especially after, I mean, I know Detroit beat Green Bay, but how good is that Green Bay team? We'll find out a lot more about them on Sunday, and what's inside their guts. But the overall vibe for Chicago, I think, is much stronger than Green Bay. I mean, the Detroit market perception, you would say. So, were you surprised? And actually, now that I look at my screen this morning, I am seeing a couple of 3s pop up in the market, with juice to the other side, of course. But you can now take 3 with Detroit. Were you surprised at all that line, opened up south of that key number?
I'm not necessarily surprised because at the end of the day, it's still the Bears. It's a division game. And even though Chicago, if they end up winning this, it certainly could be in a sloppy fashion to where it's barely just enough by a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I wasn't as surprised where it opened, and I wasn't surprised to see it tick up to 3. I think that was kind of and no offense, but to all the Detroit Lions fans out there, I was gonna say it's kind
Thank
of
you.
She's heard it
It's
all
okay.
before. She's heard it all before.
what would
Danny,
make
don't worry.
sense, right, Jared? I think you have a good point. Like, do you really take any positives away from that game aside from we love the fact that your team took down Aaron Rodgers? Anybody in the NFC North is going to be happy about that. But I don't think there really were that many positives out of Detroit or Green Bay in that spot, except you could give positives to the Lions defense for sure. But leading up into that, they were the worst defense in the NFL. So I think it made sense that the number opened with the Bears as a favorite and that it would be under the key number 3 and that it would eventually get to 3. So I'm not necessarily taken aback by that. But as weird as it seems to say for both of these teams, it is going to sort of be a litmus test. I know the Bears have been incrementally improving, but now you got to actually go out there and get the dub against a team that on paper you should be better than at home. Laura might have something different to say about that. But yeah, this is kind of a big test for this team in the rebuilding phase.
Yeah,
Lauren's
no,
not
I
betting
totally,
the Lions
I
this
agree.
week. You're not betting the
I'm
Lions
not
this
betting.
week, right?
Well,
Lauren?
I do, Jared.
Yeah.
I do bet the Lions money line every single week, but I don't tell people to do it. I'm just doing this because I root for the team. I'm not like saying, "Hey, this is a smart bet to take the Lions money line every single week," but I got to put a little something
You
on
would have
my
been
team,
genius
right?
last week. Would have been genius
I did.
last
I
week.
had money on my Lions last week. I do
good
every
loyalty.
week.
I love
17
you.
or 18
You
weeks.
are a dedicated fan. You bleed. What's the color? What's the name of the blue that you guys bleed? It's like a special name for the blue, right?
Hawaiian blue.
It's not like there it is, Hawaiian blue. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. A lot I don't even want to break down this game really because we're obviously going to lose and it's devastating and it's fine. Whatever. We're horrible. We have a bad season. We'll get there eventually. Some big moves.
Come on, have some pride.
Trade deadline.
Yeah, Lions pride.
Literally,
come on now.
Literally, figuratively, Jared. I see what you did
beat
there.
The Packers for crying out loud.
I know, we beat the Packers. I know, and Aiden Hutchinson had a pick on Aaron Rodgers, and that was
incredible.
Great.
That was awesome to watch. Love seeing that.
Danny, some big moves at the trade deadline. 2 of them being Roquan Smith, Robert Quinn. What are your thoughts on those trades and the Bears? Getting rid of those guys, bringing new guys in because Roquan Smith is tearing it up right now for the Ravens.
Yeah, and look, Roquan Smith is going to be a fantastic player in the NFL, but it was pretty clear during this past offseason that there were some differences between the two sides and the whole debacle about him representing himself, and now it's going to be the Ravens' nightmare potentially to deal with in the offseason. But during the season, again, amazing guy to have on your team, and I think that was a great acquisition by Baltimore, a team that certainly is primed to make a deep run in the postseason. But again, it was something that was clearly going to be a back and forth battle. And knowing that he was at the peak of his career in this moment, he's really young, but you tried to get the most out of him, and you could argue whether or not it was enough. But look, a 2nd and a 5th rounder at this day and age with the amount of picks they also have accumulated, it just stocks up the portfolio even more so. So it was bittersweet because he was a top draft pick a few years back. He's a big-time playmaker, very clutch defensively, and that's hard for a defensive linebacker to do. But at the end of the day as well, like this run defense was abysmal, even with Roquan Smith in the mix. And that's not necessarily directly all on him. The defensive line was not going to be this good that year. And it's an offensive league. So if they take those picks and really use it on the offensive side of the ball with the offensive line, with the wide receivers, I'm okay with that as a Bears fan. And your head coach, Matt Eberflus, is defensive oriented. So if there's going to be a weaker side of the ball, I would hope that it's the defensive side and he could kind of work with the scraps that he has for the time being. The 2 draft picks they had this past draft with Ryan Pohl's first picks with Brisker and Gordon, they've been really good in the secondary, right? They also have Eddie Jackson and Jalen Johnson. So the secondary will be fine. You just got to beef up with the backers. And then up front, now that you also lost Robert Quinn. Sorry, I was getting mixed up for a second, but Robert Quinn was coming off a historically, career-defining season last year that he wasn't going to replicate.
Yeah.
So getting him out of the mix to Philly, a Super Bowl contending team, that was a necessity. Again, getting more draft picks and getting off that huge contract to expand what you already had was the most NFL cap space going into next season. You're making that even bigger. It was the right move. It may seem kind of bad in the moment when Bears fans look at it, but you got to think about what the goal here is. It's a stepping stone season. The main part is getting your coaching staff implemented in kind of in a consistent rhythm, working together, getting that progression with Justin Fields, and then building up all around him. And you have seen the coaching staff work well, and you have seen that progression from Fields. So it's really a win-win for both teams, for both trades, I would say right now.
Brisker's been fantastic. He's a rock star. Penn State guy. Love him. Very, very disciplined player and understands the scheme that you guys are playing there. And Matt Eberflus done a great job coaching him up. It's been nice. It's been really a joy to see his development because he was a really good player at Penn State. All right, Danny, the real reason you're here is to make us some money. So you have the floor, my friend. What is on your card for NFL Week 10?
All right, well, let me get started with the game that I'm sure a lot of people will be sleeping in, but since I have a bet, maybe I'll watch a little bit. but at the same time, the bet that I have may cause me to sleep in because I don't like watching a game where I'm betting the under. So I got under 44 in the hook for this game, guys, and I'm curious your thoughts on it too. But I was unfortunately one of those people sweating out Tampa Bay this past Sunday against the Rams. Luckily, I had money line, so I didn't push on the 3. But my goodness, talk about a game that just made you want to rip your hair out of your head. What was frustrating was Tampa Bay's offense. It was fine when they were passing it past the sticks, but for some reason, Byron Leftwich kept calling these plays where they were doing screen passes behind the line of scrimmage and they would maybe get 2 yards out of it. It wasn't working. I just don't understand what the philosophy there is with the offense that also runs the ball the fewest in the NFL and passes the most, yet they're just not that great. Leonard Fournette's non-existent virtually with that run attack, and they're only getting 5 yards per play offensively, which is 29th now in the NFL. And you're going up against a pretty respectable Seahawks defense. Look, all the credit in the world to what Pete Carroll has done on that side of the ball and with the young guys that they took on from the draft. They've been a really studly group. So I think that Tampa Bay still will be pretty slow to get going on the offensive side of the ball. And then conversely for Seattle, well, yeah, Geno Smith is the most efficient quarterback in the NFL, but if Pete Carroll has a choice, I feel like he would rather run the ball and kind of control the game as much as he could with that side of it. And Tampa Bay's run defense has taken a little bit of a hit, right? They're now allowing about 4.6 yards per carry, and they rank 13th against the run according to DVOA, which, if you really think about it, isn't bad. Like, there's been a lot of criticism with Tampa Bay's defense, but I feel like they're more critical because how great they were and what precedent they set for themselves the past couple of years. And because overall they're losing to the likes of the Carolina Panthers. But that's more of what the offense isn't doing than what's happening with the defense. The defense, by normal standards, is still a really strong group. So I feel like Pete Carroll is still going to try to instill the run game with Kenneth Walker. It's just going to be a slow, kind of methodical game where these teams aren't necessarily executing in the red zone. Seahawks only scoring a touchdown in the red zone 48% of the time. That's 26. The Bucs only scoring a touchdown in the red zone 44% of the time, which is 30th in the NFL. International game, add some kind of outside things going on and difficult travel, if you want to call it that, seems to be lower scoring. So anything over 44, I think, is worth the play to the under.
Das Boot. You love to see it. I'm all about this game in Germany. Like, get the boot out, let's chug the beer, and let's watch some NFL Week 10 as we make the turn to the second half of the season. Okay, Bears money line. I know you talked about it a little bit, but please twist the knife a little bit more.
See, I don't like what you're doing right now. You're playing the pessimistic card, and that's what I usually do. So you feel bad, and then it's a surprising win. So it's like it's good either way. But I respect it because it's a good strategy.
He's devious like that. He's very devious, Danny. You have to keep an eye on her at all times.
Yeah, I can tell. Well, she gets it being a Lions fan. It's a little bit, being a Bears fan is pretty brutal, but Lions is even, So we'll let her have it.
Thank you. But, okay, keep twisting. Keep twisting.
So I am on the Bears here, and again, with the spread consensus wise pretty much being at 3, I really think there's a legit shot it could fall on 3. And I'm someone who, and I know not a lot of people like to subscribe to this, but I'll lay a little bit more for the added security of the money line, and especially in the NBA too, but in the NFL from time to time, I'll do it if it's at the key number of 3. So I laid about minus $1.45 with the Bears on the money line here. Look, I mean, over their last 3 games, we talked about their progression. They faced the 1st, 5th, and then 27th ranked defense, according to DVOA, respectively. And they were able to average over 31 points per game throughout that span. I had mentioned earlier that the past 4 games, they've rushed for over 200 yards. And it just so happens they're going up against a Lions run defense that is allowing about $1.50 to opponents on the ground per game. They're allowing 5 yards per carry, and the Bears are running the ball the most in the NFL. And the Lions, I mean, Lauren, you could speak to this, but like Jared Goff seems to have been struggling or be struggling when he's not playing at home, just in all of these road spots, and obviously in general right now. But they've only averaged 12 points per game throughout their last 4 spots. And I do think it'll be higher scoring because this Bears defense is pretty depleted, as we were mentioning, shipping off some of their key pieces. But I could see this being a vintage Jared Goff, costly interception in the second half type of game while it's really close, and then the Bears break away. I just think Justin Fields, what we have been seeing him going on this trajectory, is the better quarterback. They're the better coach team right now. And as much home field advantage you want to give it, like the Bears fans, after that Dolphins game, like they were rowdy the whole time because you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Scoring this many points, especially against a solid team in Miami, not the best defense, but a solid team. Now you come into this game with Detroit at home, a vulnerable opponent. They're expecting a win. So I think it's going to be a great environment. I think the Bears have the upper hand here, and I think they end up with the dub.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You got a teaser on
What
your
about
card
the
too.
last
7-pointer.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about.
Yeah, so then the last play I got, I don't typically like doing 7-point teasers, but the other teaser that I liked here was the Kansas City Chiefs, and the only way to get them under the key number of 3 was to tease them down by 7. So I teased them down to minus 2.5 against Jacksonville. Not much needs to be said there. Huge discrepancy offensively with these two teams, and I think Kansas City will want to go out there and kind of get a comfortable win after a not-so-comfortable win this past Sunday night against the Tennessee Titans. And then the main teaser that I liked originally was the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it was 2.5 until it wasn't. And then I was seeing 1.5. So I teased them up with the 7-point to plus 8.5. But they're coming off a bye and taking on the Saints team that has honestly just been brutal in every facet of the game. Like Andy Dalton is not a viable option. I would go back to Jameis Winston. In my opinion, at least you maybe have some hope for fireworks every now and then with Jameis Winston. But if you get an ounce of pressure on the Red Rocket, he's just going to crumble, which was on display against Baltimore. So Pittsburgh, not as good of a defense. They're banged up. We all know this. But coming off a bye in the underdog role at home, look, they may not win this thing outright, but teasing them up to over a touchdown, I think you're pretty safe in that regard with Mike Tomlin as your coach. And look, Kenny Pickett's throwing interceptions, but at least they're letting him experiment and letting him let it fly. Like they weren't doing that with Justin Fields at first, but Pickett can move the ball. Their run offense is terrible with Najee Harris. But again, I think this could be a lower scoring game and closely kept enough to keep it within a touchdown. So I like teasing up Pittsburgh.
Danny Burke, we so appreciate you coming on the show, giving us your Week 10 picks and going over your Chicago Bears who are going up against my Detroit Lions. We'll see how that game plays out. We'll be chatting this weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you bet, guys. Thanks for having me on. Best of luck.
Great job, Danny.
Thank you. You too. You can follow him on Twitter at DannyBurke5, host of the football betting podcast for VSiN Live and Bet on Chicago for WLS AM 890. All right, before we get into our best bets of the day, let's talk about Superbook Sports for a second because Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports, the best place to bet football this season. Download the Superbook app or visit superbook.com right now, and they're going to match your first bet up to $1,000, whether it wins or whether it loses. Plus, they already have lines up for every NFL game the rest of the season. The #1 voted sports book in Vegas, now available in the palm of your hand. Visit superbook.com to join. Now let's head to Pickswise.com, Jared. 3-star play of the day. Who do we got today?
Got a lot today. Got some college football for the weekend. Got some college basketball for tonight. Michigan State, Gonzaga, College of Charleston, UNC. You got some NBA for tonight. Bucks, Spurs, And of course, like I said, lots of college football for tomorrow. So I won't give away the farm here. I will make you go bury the crops yourself. Get your corn and your soybeans and your lima beans. It's all there on the site for you. Check it out.
Make sure to check it out. A place where they don't do very much agriculture is Colorado, Jared, and you're taking them getting a whole lot of points tonight.
A whole lot of points. This is one where I actually feel okay with saying it's too many points. I actually feel like I can say that, and it's true because my numbers have this at 28.5. So we're getting 34.5. That is, so I usually what I do now with my ratings that I compile from a lot of these other very notable rating sites that are much smarter than me. And then I kind of tabulate which lines are the most off. On the underdog side, this is the most points that a line is off, quote unquote, according to the rating systems that I use. And by the way, last week, this process gave us LSU, gave us Liberty, and gave us Michigan State. Double-digit underdogs outright. Do I think Colorado's going to win this game outright? No. But USC plays UCLA next week. It's arguably the biggest game of their season. And it's a spot where I could see them just kind of sticking it in neutral and saying we could give a B- C+ effort here and beat Colorado with one hand tied behind their backs. And frankly, based on the numbers that I've seen with Colorado this year, they're probably right. I don't have anything nice to say about this Colorado team. They are awful in every category. Awful, awful, awful. But USC hasn't covered as much as they've won outright this year. They're 8-1 straight up, and they're 5-4 against the spread. They're not, to me, a team that you lay big numbers with because their defense is a little suspect and the mental focus just isn't there. The last 2 weeks, they barely got by two very poor Pac-12 opponents, Cal and Arizona. They gave up a ton of points, 72 combined points in those two games. Arizona's offense is good. Cal's is not. So that's the path to covering this game for the Buffaloes. USC puts it in early, gets up 2 or 3 scores, and then just kind of coasts the rest of the game. Colorado, scrappy, figures out a way to get across the finish line and keep this within the number. Only one unit here. I don't love this play, but again, when I get bets from my sharp sportsbook friends, Zach Lucas, shout out, I bet them. I shoot first and I ask questions.
I like it.
And we're shooting first with Colorado here, plus 34.5.
A lot of points. You love to see it. Colorado plus 34.5. I'm taking it to the nation's capital where I like the Lightning money line. They're decently priced road favorites here at minus 140. I know it's a little juicy, but not too much for me just with how decent the Lightning have been playing and how really bad the Capitals have been playing in this spot. They're in the middle of the Caps are in the middle of a 1-3-2 skid since the end of October. The under, though, interesting, is cashed in 7 of their last 8 games, but I don't necessarily trust the under hitting here. It's set at 6. It's just a little bit low for me. Andrei Vasilevsky hasn't necessarily been at his best the last 10 days. He's 1-1-1 with a 2.96 goals against average, 909 save percentage. He has yet to post a shutout this year, which is really crazy. Darcy Kemper also struggling this year in between the pipes for the Caps, 0-3-0 in his 3 November starts. 2.70 goals against average and 897 save percentage. These losses, though, are not totally his fault for the skid because the Caps have not been able to get any offense going. They've only scored 4 total goals in their last 3 games combined. I like the Lightning here. They're decently priced road favorites. They're ranked in the top 10 in expected goals and high danger scoring creation rate. And Washington ranks 30th in the league in defensive expected goals against this season. I was looking at the puck line for Tampa Bay laying a goal and a half at plus 160, but they've been a favorite 9 times since mid-October this season, and they've only covered the spread 4 times. If I sprinkle it, it's going to be because of how bad the Caps have been playing, not necessarily because I love the Lightning. I'm winning by 2 goals or more, but I just feel like the safest play here is Lightning money line. I know they're coming off the loss to the Oilers on Tuesday. They ended their 4-game homestand 2-1-1. Now it's a 2-game, 3-day home and home, kind of approaching it like a playoff situation. And the Lightning, they know a little bit about playoff situations. You want to get the first game and then you focus on the second. I feel like this is the one that they really, really want to get, and only laying 40 cents for it. Lock it up, baby. That's it for us today. Find us on the Pickswise YouTube channel. Go to Pickswise.com. Follow us on Twitter. Lauren Jabara, Jared Smith. See you guys tomorrow. Let's get it. Let's bet it.